Hello everyone, GamerChris64 here, and today I am doing One Piece TCG for Dummies. This is your introduction video for anything One Piece TCG related from me. Um, gosh darn it. Stop snitching on me, Google.com. What is this presentation even about? Well, if you might ask, this is our basic notes that I'll take. Basic knowledge of what TCG is and what One Piece is, because, well, we're playing One Piece. Fundamentals of how to play this game, how to build a deck for beginners, and why I love this goofy little game too much. Part 1, TCGs. Well, this is a trading card game, so what you would think of poker and all that, poker and blackjack for a few gambling examples, turns into a trading aspect that people use, like Pokemon Magic the Gathering and Yu-Gi-Oh! This situation is another one called One Piece. There are typically games where you play up to 40, 60 cards in a deck from packs that you could buy from places like Walmart, Target, Best Buy, wherever you want. Buying, trading to battle others with their deck. That is the simple premise: is you buy and you trade. That's why it's called a trading card game. What is One Piece? One Piece, in short, is a long-running comic series starring Monkey D. Luffy, or Straw Hat Luffy, as he explores the seas with his friends as they look for the legendary treasure, the One Piece. If y'all have not watched this series yet, I heavily recommend it. It is one of my favorite anime, and I will genuinely have a video coming up about this that is edited and so much later about why I love this. Part 2, how do people even play this game? You might be wondering, no, you might be wondering this yourself as, well, a man has spent way too long about how in the world he wants to inform you how to play this game. So how would you? Well, you start by having 61 cards that you've gotten over packs, trading and buying, etc. of three different types of cards. One leader card, 10 dawn cards, separated from the rest and put in different areas. Both this and the leader are separated from each other, as well as a deck of 58 cards of the rest of the different cards. Not Dawn, not a leader, but every other card is put into a group of 50 of your choosing. From there, you'll be able to start playing, and once you lay out the cards, you can battle out against another person with a strategic and thoughtful battle to figure out who will become the victor. There's obviously more to it, and we'll go in more depth after learning what these cards, what these mechanics and what the mechanics on these cards do. Because you can't just, it's a bit more complex than just saying this in a paragraph. To start out, we got 4 different cards. We got our leader cards, we got our character cards, we got our events, and we got our stage cards. To begin with, you have to focus on your leader cards. Leaders are the easiest cards to pick up, but are the most influential of these card games. So, of this card game specifically. So, to build around a deck, you will typically, if you want to build around a strategy, you look at the leader, because each leader has their own specific thing. So, like Zoro likes adding 3 Dawn to get an additional swing. So you get yourself cards that like to either rest your opponent or like to give your character Dawn. Give your leader Dawn. For Monkey D. Luffy over here, it is about gosh darn it. It is about ramping. So you want to build a deck all about ramping is the thing. These cards typically have 5 life and 5k power, as well as a few other as well as an effect. There are a few exceptions to this rule. However, it is crucial to know about these details because they will come into play later. But to know that they have 5k power on average, they have life, which is typically 5, are very important for how this game plays. And that you need to attack into your leader 5 times plus the plus an additional time because they have to be out of their life and attacking one more time in order to win. Dawn cards. This sounds weird to explain out of context, but this is the way that you'll be paying for all the cards I will explain later. These you'll gain slowly through the match and help you boost or play out cards of your deck. Some have visually different dawns, dawn art. So like this is the one that comes in a starter deck, and this is one from a specific set. I forget its name, but they will all be equally treated the same, no matter the artwork. Character cards. These are attacking cards that will help you advance the game in a multitude of ways. But typically speaking, they'll have a few other ways of playing and can help you out boost. However, you can lose these cards, but they will be one of the few cards to stay on the field. So it's a risk reward of whether or not you want to use these cards or not and swing into your opponent, because they can be swung back at. Character cards, part 2, counter. So before I go any deeper on the mechanics of this game, I have to explain counter. As I said above, they can be risk, as well as the leaders. They can be attacked. So in order of how this game works is that you get to swing at a card. So let's just say you swing in, and let's just say you swing, the leader swings 5 against your leader, that is also 5. So at that point, you have to judge whether or not you have 1k counter or more, or essentially just think about 1 counter more than what it is. Because the 1,000 doesn't matter, you are specifically looking at the 1,000 number, which is 5. Do you have something that has 1k counter or more? So you can't block, in order for this to work, you have to trash. So you put a card from your hand into the discard pile. So you cannot trash a brick, is what this is considered. Brook here. Brook does not have anything on the left of the left middle of the card. So he's considered a brick. Now here's a 1k counter in Charlotte Pudding because she has 1k counter. That you can counter off with and get off scot-free. Yamato over here is a 2k counter. This you can also use if you have 1k that you just need to block with. However, that will tell your opponent a few things if you're doing your math weirdly and giving them extra stuff you don't need to. This gives your opponent information, this game is all about information. But you can use both of these to block a attack of equal value. But this, if your opponent likes to swing higher, so like a 6k, like Brooke, swings into your leader, you can trash this in your hand, and that'll protect it fully. But that's how counter works. It can go, it's a math game, essentially. Now, we got part 3, which is the types of characters. So I showed off a few cards earlier that could mean a multitude of things, but they could be grouped up in different ways. So you have your searchers, you have your vanillas, or your pure offense, you have your utility, or mix between a vanilla and a vent card, and a searcher or whatever you need, a blocker or a rush. So in this case, we have 5 cards right in front of us. Well, a few of these will be easier to explain than the others, as you have Nami, for example. It has a look at the top. So a searcher will look at cards from your deck and get out one for you. So this likes to look at 5 cards from the top of our deck and reveal up to 1 Straw Hat crew. Keep in mind, a searcher card will specifically focus 1 attribute. So this says Straw Hat. So you want to build a deck around Straw Hats for Nami to work as well as she can. But that is what a searcher does. Its main role is that it has 2k power. So it won't be able to swing as easily unless you put stuff on it. However, it is still on the board and can attack weaker cards for you. But it will most likely will not affect the game state with your life specifically. Now you get Lord of the Coast. This is a card that has 1k counter. It has 8k power, has 1k counter, has 8k power. That is very weird to say back to back. But you look at this, it has no effect. That is what we call vanilla. Or it quite literally is the vanilla ice cream of One Piece card games cards, where it has no effect, but it trades the effect for an additional 1k in power. So like you have Saw over here is a 6/7 and has an effect. This is a 6/8, but instead of not having an effect, it has an additional counter, additional power. Jeez, sorry, I'm stuttering a lot. I'm tripping over my words. I mean, so then we have Whoop Slap here, which is a utility card. Whoop Slap does not have any. Why in the world am I getting Discord notifications right now? Wait a minute. Sorry, I did not mean to have Discord notifications on. Whoop Slap is a utility card, and the fact being that it will rest 2 cards. It will give 2 rested cards to our Luffy card. So this will boost our character up by 2k for an attack, but because of that, this eventually gives you utility, as it gives you stuff for free just by playing this card out. So neat is the best way I can describe that. It does not have any power, or utility cards will not have as much power as they should, because as a typical card should, but it gains value in its effect, as in gaining you an advantage via its effect instead of giving you a board state. Blockers. These are the simplest way. This and Rush both have this effect, where it will give you an exact detail of what it does. But blockers let you rest a card, and that'll be the target. So let's just say your leader swings into Whoop Slap for 0. You can block with Jaguar Desol, which is a blocker for 7k. And guess what? Because you blocked with a higher number card, that doesn't get destroyed. And neither does Whoop Slap, because you blocked with it. Now, if a card were to swing higher, like the Shanks were to swing into the Saw would die because it has less attack. However, it still can protect anything else on the field that you might need. So if you have a higher K, so like a 12k, which is a boss card, you can use this Saw as a way of protecting it. And then we get Rush. Rush is the type of card that is weird, that I need to explain one attribute of the game. And that's that even if you have an attacking card, so like Lord of the Coast, which is a vanilla attacker, that's 8k, it cannot attack the turn it is played. However, Rush cards, which are typically in red, but there are exceptions to that rule where it is also others, can also attack on its turn that's played. So you have to be careful sometimes, as your opponent might run a Rush card. And if they run a Rush, that's an additional attack you might be worried about, which could cost you the game, so you gotta be careful about that. Event cards. Event cards are a one-time use card that can do a utility of things. They are considered bricks because they have no counter, but their effects will give off a reason to run them. So there is a search effect for some of them. So like Luffy's the Male, be King of the Pirates is a card that if your leader is Sanji, you look at the top 3 of your deck and you add 1 to your hand without showing your opponent. It does not say, but it just says, and add 1 to your hand. So it's a draw effect essentially, and then place the rest of the bottom in any order. So that gives an additional advantage to Nami, which has to show off what you pull. So it gives your opponent question of what to use. You have, but some will also show your opponent, but some decks benefit off of using events in general, so you don't stress out too much about running events. You have Gum Gum Red Rock, which lets the place up to one of your characters to choose up to one character, whether it be yours if you somehow need to, or to place one of your opponent's characters on the bottom of the owner's deck. So that means if by any chance you need to place their boss card and get it off the field, you easily can just play Red Rock. But that's a blue card, which we'll get into detail later how that works. Or it could be a counter card. So like Gum Gum Jet Gatling, you can get 3k counter for the effect of trashing this and one other card. And the way that works is you can trash cards that have no value, and you get value off of it. Stage cards. These will typically not see play and are easy to ignore, but still be helpful to know how they work. Most of them have an activate main to enable a strategy to further a strategy like ramping Dawn, restanding characters, or making a situation better for you by having these stages out. Colors in One Piece. There are 6 colors in One Piece that have specific rules. Well, they have specific archetypes, I should rather say. They have multiple play styles, each surrounding the archetype that they're based around. To understand these principles, we'll have to further explain by separating them individually for a best way of explaining it. So we got red, which is rush. By the way, for anyone that knows these leaders or a question about colors, I'm going to be showing you pure color leaders. So ones that only have one specific color in mind. I will not be showing ones with 2 because that gets more complex. Red is specifically rush. The pros of it, it's massively aggressive. So if you like an archetype that is really aggressive, this is for you. You have access to rush cards, so you can play a lot of cards on the turn they are played, which can give your opponent aggression. I'm not give your opponent aggression. Give your opponent a stressful way of dealing with you as you are playing back-to-back, attacking a lot more. They're pretty cheap on average. They are pretty cheap to build. Red is one of the cheapest decks, typically. There are some exceptions to that rule. However, most cards, you will be building a really cheap deck. And then they can also manipulate power, so they can minus attack off of characters or leaders, so that way they can make it easier to control board. But their cons, however, is that they typically struggle later in a match without the support of another color, as well as they typically leave themselves vulnerable with not having many blockers in their deck, as they like to run a lot of aggression. That leaves themselves vulnerable because they like to run a lot of bricks in their hand, and not many blockers, if any. Green is resting. The pros of it, oh my god, I did not even write the cons. Oh my gosh, okay. Our pros, we have mid-range and control deck. That's typically a playstyle. They can restand your own Dawn. They can rest up your... I'm like in a mess right now because I jacked that up. You can rest characters and opponents' Dawn. You can rest your opponent's characters and your opponent's Dawn for better control or access to any in a game, so that way they cannot play their events or anything, or to rest their blockers. And they can freeze characters or characters. I just said character. Oh, or they can even rest your leader. Good gravy. Or freeze them. Oh my god, it said freeze. They can freeze the character or leader. So best case of a character being frozen is a carrot or a Orlong for the 2. For people I know. The cons of this deck, of these types of decks, is that they like to play control. So if you have more aggression based, they're prone to it. This is the deck that is very prone to control because they're prone to aggression because they like to control a lot. It's the biggest thing, which is also a pretty cheap deck. But keep in mind there are a few pricey cards, but most of them got reprinted recently. So as of right now, a really cheap place to start building your decks around. Blue is your control and main deck manipulation. Pros, you're getting additional hand size from effects to draw. Typically is the effect is hand size. You're getting value off of you manipulating your hand size in some way. these are the most controlled decks in One Piece. Like, including green, this is... oh, shoot. Including green, this is the most control deck. Like, if you're wanting to play control, green and blue are my biggest recommendations. Blue has the most variety with their archetypes, given the fact being they are more support. It's a more supportive color, and they hold a lot of budget decks. So if you want to play, let's just say, Buggy, Buggy's really cheap right now. If you want to go into that, if you want to go into a little bit more, because there are not really, there's Kuzan, which is also a pure blue that I'd heavily recommend. Not right now, but like, it's, if you're thinking of pure blue, that's the other deck I'd fully recommend. It's extremely cheap. There's a few others, but I'll explain what the others are after the cons, because it's very important to state. They are typically vulnerable to effects, and I say that as in, these cards like to draw or give you an effect around a specific way of benefiting you, but their weakness is the fact being of, okay, they let you get more control, but they aren't helping you stay controlled, if that makes any sense. Like, they will help you out. They don't do more than a body would, typically. They have an on-play effect. That's what they mostly do. Buggy does a little bit more than that. However, most cards typically don't in blue. Just want to say that right now. There are some exceptions to this rule. However, typically vulnerable, like I said. Blue typically supports other colors rather than having a true identity. I say that, and it's complicated to explain. If you look at many decks, like Blue-Purple Luffy, for example, it mainly plays around the purple, with some blue support in with it. That is how a lot of blue decks play that like to be in the meta, or that like to be well played. There are a few exceptions, like I said, Buggy and Kuzan are the two playable ones, and there used to be Nami, but I didn't show Nami because that's a band leader. And then they are prone to decking out because they like to control the deck. So, like, they like to pull cards out of their deck. So, because of how One Piece works, you can lose by decking out. So, you don't want to be drawing all your cards. And the other issue is the fact being with how tiebreakers work. And the way that works is, depending on who has more life than your opponent, that means that's who wins if there becomes a tie, or like you come to the timer and it goes to 0. You typically count your life. However, if you don't count the life, then it goes to the cards in your deck. And that's the biggest prone with blue. So they like to finish the game a lot faster because of that ruling. So you got to be careful around that. Those are my biggest cons with blue in general. But personally, one of my favorite colors. Purple is your Dawn manipulation. This is a little bit complex, so you might have to stay a little bit with me. And I say complex, but it's weird. Their effects don't cost active Dawn. So, like, with green a while back, it has this right here that costed Dawn for Bonnie. That means that it has to play Dawn in order to use. However, for the amount of power that purple leaders get, it doesn't cost active Dawn. So you can use whatever Dawn for it. They can ramp to the late game and out-tempo their opponent completely. So leaders that are in purple can go up, like, let's just say your opponent goes to 8 Dawn, they can be all the way up to 10, and they can be up quicker than that. And they typically have really strong effects for their costs. So, like, extremely good value for their cards. However, there are some extreme cons to them, because they are the most unique cards in this game series. 1, they are typically vulnerable to removal. Like blue, not protected too much, shockingly. And I say typically, there are some exceptions. Actually, that's most of this deck because most of the series in general. But purple's extremely prone. And I say extremely, I mean that quite literally. There are not many ways to protect yourself. These decks have a little bit more technical, a bit more technique to play, because the fact is you have to keep track of everything. Because how everything is played, you will not keep track if you don't pay it, if you don't stop, if you don't pay attention. Jeez Louise. And then hand size is a bit fragile without other colors to support. So like a big combo is blue and purple, because blue likes to add cards. Well, purple likes to do with different bits of different things. Then you get black, which is removal and grave manipulation. Ooh, spooky. Pros is that you can recycle cards after they are used, has the most access to removal, and can control the board state with the easiest because you're recycling cards, as you could also regain board control. However, there are heavy cons to this. And I say heavy as there's a few. It is one of the most expensive colors you will ever play if it's in meta. And what I mean by that is that they were commonly over $200 for their deck, for like commonly like $200 to $300. If it is a meta that can be played regardless of the color, I say this, black is one of the most expensive decks to build. There are some exceptions which you can look into it. However, just keep that in mind that black is overall an expensive color. As anti-removal in a meta, whether it be few cards say that it cannot be removed by the field, black will hate that a lot because it likes to play removal. So black kind of has a bad matchups to a few cards. So like you have Jesus Burger. Oh shoot, I can't say his name. It's a Blackbeard character. Whether it be him, Sanji, or the current new characters in new deck that's also black, that has anti-removal, those will be the matchups that black hates running against. And it also doesn't play out too many strong cards in the late game. There are some, but it's more focused. But some of the cards are around keeping your board control. Like Gecko Moria has more pace out of a early game. Typically does not focus on too much of a late game by itself. And then our last leader is yellow. Yellow will be able to gain momentum in its life because it likes to run a lot of triggers. Has a ton of trigger effects, like I said. So the way that triggers work is that they give you momentum by using your life, essentially. So whether it be gaining you a body on the board or letting you draw cards, this will help you gain additional effects, which is typically in yellow. Can gain additional life and remove opponent's life via effects, which is crazy. And a mid to late game deck. So if you're wanting to pay patiently, a Nell and a few other yellow decks are for you. The cons, however, it's very gimmick based a lot of the time, where it is RNG dependent, or what I mean by that is it relies on your shuffling to make sure you have good life cards. Because if not, it depends on the pools of what you pull out of your life. It can be pretty expensive, as like I said, black is an expensive color. I would kind of argue it's the fifth most, with yellow being the most expensive leader, because it commonly is the most expensive leader. While black is kind of like in a situation where if it's in a bad state, it might be cheaper. However, yellow typically, with how it likes to gain advantage of that life, making it have more, typically is really expensive. And the worst issue is that it's a bit fragile. So because of how it focuses on all these traits, it's not always the best to keep it stealth stabilized early on. But it will have an extremely powerful late game. So do keep that in mind. Now we have the basics of building a deck. Now that you know all these colors, now you have to think of yourself, what are you going to be putting in these 50 cards that I stated earlier? Sorry, I have to take a deep breath because we have been recording for 30 minutes, so yippee. Well, typically speaking, a deck will have 8 to 12 2K counters, so that way we don't have to be playing too many events. We run 4 to 8 searcher cards, so it can be somewhat consistent in what we play, regardless of the fact of how we play it. And 0 to 4 boss cards. Some decks like to play very aggressive, some characters like to play mid-range. Unless you're playing a really heavy deck, you don't run too many. At most, you'll run 8 boss cards. Searcher cards, it depends of your archetype, and counter cards, that's your average. The specifics rely on your leader and options, as the rest of the deck space can be kind of reliant on whatever you prefer playing, because, well, this game's about having fun at the end of the day, so just mess around with whatever. Part 2, Sealed. Well, this is a funny format, and I have seals because, fun fact, there's not really seals in One Piece unless you include the dugongs, which aren't seals. Which aren't, like, called a seal, so I didn't want to put them on here. So here's some 2 pictures of seal, of its feel from Pokemon. This format, typically for pre-release, you'll see you get 6 packs of whatever the new set is, or whatever set it's based off of, to build a deck of 40 cards instead of the 50 that I mentioned, and to mess around with whatever's in the packs. Typically in this format, you more focus adding vanilla cards and blockers than a specific combo due to the lack of control in your cards and the lack of 2Ks. For those that want a more beginner-friendly way to start playing this game and to figure out the how this game is formatted, despite its price, I'd heavily recommend this, as it gives everyone a fair advantage despite money, and it just lets you figure it out from there. Basics Part 5, the Dawn Curve. This is a typical state of the game where if you are going first or second affects how much value you get. Ignoring purple, like I stated earlier, your Dawn Curve is a standard that can either be going first, goes in odd numbers up to 10, and stays at 10, or if you're going second, goes even all the way up to 10 and stays at 10. You want to build your deck around figuring out the worst case scenario on both so that we could be flexible worst case scenario. You don't want to be leaning towards one, as if that happens, well, you don't have anything to play or the best thing that you play during that turn. So you're kind of out of luck in a lot of ways. So you don't want to be put into a 50-50 situation just because you didn't build around it. You want to just be flexible in that. And keep this in mind. Part 6, keywords. Jump scare. But there are multiple keywords what should know before you play the game. These effects are kind of important if you want to know how to use them right. Can help you win games. Like before, there was Blocker and Rush. However, a few others that are really good to know is Banish, which so if you get a opponent's life card, which typically would be put into your hand, into your opponent's hand if you attack into it, Banish would instead trash it, so it does not get a trigger, and it doesn't get any value from your opponent from taking the life. Double Attack. What Double Attack does is that for attacking into a card, attacking into a leader, it takes 2 life instead of 1, which sounds weird on paper because you would think it would be able to attack twice, but no, that is a different effect entirely, weirdly. It is called Restanding, by the way. Main. This is very important to explain specifically for one leader in Blackbeard. Main is on main, or once on main is a effect that can happen once per turn, where it is avoidant of on play, but main is just okay. You can do an activation of whatever, of whether it be pay a card, rest a card, whatever, to do a set effect. It's not much more complex than that, but it can be used once per turn and can be used multiple turns if it stays on the field. On play, cards, essentially, you play it out, it gets the effect. Now it has no other point on the field other than to attack. Then you have counter. Counter cards or counter is like what I said above whenever we explained the events. That's just a simple way of saying, okay, here's additional ways of gaining counter. However, there's also a few other events in the deck, as well as that will be not exactly around countering out an event. However, it's a card that can only be used during it. So like you can summon, there's a card that can summon out another card, but only in the counter stage where you have to block something. That sounds complicated as crap, so yippee. And then there's trigger, which I just explained earlier, explaining yellow. It looks like you're going to the Shadow Realm, Jimbo. Basics Part 7. Where can you play this game? Well, this is a card game, so you buy cards, you can play them anywhere as long as you have them. For physical ways of playing the game, I'd heavily recommend you start out with a starter deck and play with friends. Or play like with packs if there isn't no starter decks. But it's a friendly way of playing. If you want to go into more official ways of playing, physical though, you can go to local events. These will be card shops that you can go to that have a higher skill level than just your friends that don't know too much about a game. But will be very great at meeting new people and getting better at the game. There's also regionals, but we kind of don't talk about that right now because you are a beginner. This is for if you wanna be in a highly competitive format, but that will also get you crazy stuff, but is extremely competitive. So keep that in mind. If you want to play test, however, without spending any money, I highly recommend the One Piece trading card game Sim, as is unofficial, but it helps you build out your decks the best way you can without spending any money and be extremely flexible for you. So this makes this game easily accessible for new players. You just get on the sim and you build a deck and you play it with other people. That can be either yourself, strangers, etc. And the basics finale, picking a leader. Well, I've just said all of this. And, well, you can figure you want to start playing the game because somehow this video convinced you. How do you pick a leader? Well, I just labeled some of the basics given how the colors work, so if you're interested, you can go at that. But if there's a character you like, whether it be like for me, I like Sanji, personally one of my favorite characters, or like you want to see a character that's just viable, which you look up online to see what is, or you just like that a character has a wacky gimmick, well, all of that's okay in perfectly reasonable ways. The most important thing is for you to have fun. And that's what I hope at the end of the day, if this convinced you to play, I hope you'll have fun. Because genuinely, this is amazing. And congratulations! Y'all have finished this video. And you now know the beginning parts of knowing this card game. And from here on out, you can experiment playing the game. With this at least being helpful to get your foot rolling throughout the door. I have a few, oh my gosh, I'm stuttering. I got a few things planned, so if you want more in-depth knowledge about this card game, feel free to like and subscribe, as I'll be posting more content real soon. In the meantime, enjoy some cake with Chopper and Luffy. I just want to say to you all, this has been one of my most experimental videos. And I just want to say thank you all so much for listening. If you were to be interested in this, I'd highly recommend you comment down below what you all would like for me to talk about next. I will have a few more videos about this game, but that's enough for me. I hope you all have the best day ever, and I'll see you all later. Peace.